Bishop Emeritus Joseph Zhu of Nanyang, China, has died at the age of 99. In February, he fell ill with COVID-19, but recovered, becoming the oldest Chinese citizen to beat the disease. He was first ordained in 1957. In 1964, he was sent to a forced labor camp because of his faith, and he was later sentenced to 10 years in prison and re-education on charges of counter-revolutionary activity. In 2002, he became Bishop of Nanyang. He served most of his priesthood as a member of the underground church. With Vatican permission, he resigned as bishop in 2010, but then asked to be officially recognized by the government-run Catholic Patriotic Association, which accepted his request. It is still unclear why he asked to be recognized by the government-run church. Sources say he was pressured. Others say Bishop Zhu's membership and move might have been a means of gaining leverage against the government to secure the return of church property seized during the Cultural Revolution. May Joseph Zhu rest in peace. And Wednesday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo notified Congress that the Trump administration no longer regards Hong Kong as independent from mainland China. Pompeo's statement comes amid calls in Congress for the U.S. to respond to Beijing's imposition of national security laws over the territory. This after thousands of protesters took to the streets in Hong Kong. Secretary Pompeo said, quote, Hong Kong does not continue to warrant treatment under United States laws in the same manner as U.S. laws were applied to Hong Kong before July of 1997. It is now clear that China is modeling Hong Kong after itself, end quote. The announcement by Pompeo does not impose any immediate penalties on China. Such action would have to be decided by the President and Congress, but the State Department has to evaluate that relationship every so often. Joining me now to discuss what is happening in Hong Kong, what it means for U.S.-China relations, and much more is Professor of Political Science at the University of Notre Dame, Victoria Hui. Professor, thank you for being here. You're a Hong Kong native. What do you make of Pompeo's statement first, and how dire is this situation for the people of Hong Kong?
Well, thank you so much for having me. First of all, what is important is that Hong Kong is supposed to have an autonomous status. So what Pompeo was trying to decertify is that Hong Kong no longer has autonomy, which can then kick off a whole bunch of actions as stipulated by first the 1992 Hong Kong Policy Act, and the revision also passed last year, the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. At the same time, the situation is very dire. And in a way, it is almost about time for the world to recognize that Hong Kong really has no autonomy, that Beijing has broken the promises of one country, two systems, with Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong under a high degree of autonomy. So, and in fact, I would say that for 23 years, Beijing was taking actions in piecemeal to erode Hong Kong's freedoms, small steps, one at a time, so that the world, so for the past 20 years, whether it is Washington or London, they would issue reports and statements saying that they are very concerned about, for example, the abduction of a bookseller from Hong Kong taken across the border, another abduction of a billionaire who had very good connections to high levels of corruption, or the disqualifications of democratically elected legislators. All of those actions, every time, oh, these are concerning, but overall things are doing okay. But this time, Beijing took a very nuclear option, and so it just makes it impossible to look the other way.
Yeah, and let's talk about that option that they took here. On Thursday, China's legislature nearly unanimously approved a new national security law for Hong Kong, and it's really aimed at suppressing what they call subversion, secession, terrorism, or any acts that they deem a threat to national security. Now, the specifics of the new law have yet to be defined. However, the final rules will determine the fate of Hong Kong's autonomy, Professor. Is this the beginning of the end of Hong Kong's autonomy, that carve-out status that they have? And what does this mean to the protesters that you've written so eloquently about over the years?
Well, the important thing to also see is that what they passed at the National People's Congress was a decision. And now the decision is going to be passed on to the National People's Congress Standing Committee to actually draft the law. Is this the end of the one country, two systems model, or Hong Kong, the end of Hong Kong? Definitely. But at the same time, for a lot of Hong Kong people, for my friends and family, now that when they go to the street, when they try to just, go to a restaurant, when they try to go to a shopping mall, they already run the risk of getting tear gas by the police or getting pepper spray by the police, even if they are not even protesting. And then also, we grew up with all these freedoms that we could say whatever we like. These days, people don't even dare to really speak their minds. My sister was telling me that I should erase all of those pro-democracy posts on my social media. But of course, I'm already a quasi-public figure, so that would be pointless. But then I think some of my friends are unfriending me. And what the law does is to mark the formal end. And so turning things that have already become lived experiences of ordinary Hong Kong people into the law. And it's going to be even a lot more scarier.
Now, tell me how the protests we're seeing now, and they are limited because of COVID and because of, as you mentioned, the oppression and the regime watching carefully and arresting people. I've been witnessing some of these arrests on social media and elsewhere. Tell me the difference between these protests and the 2019 protests. Those were really about leadership and that extradition act where they were going to pull people out of Hong Kong and try them in mainland China. How is this different?
This is actually many times worse. So the extradition protest that was introduced by the Hong Kong government last spring would have, if it had been passed, would have allowed Beijing to request to have anyone in Hong Kong extradited across the border to Beijing and subject to mainland China's jurisdiction. We know how unjust the justice system in China is. What this bill would do, what this new law would do is, okay, you guys don't really want to be extradited across the mainland to the other side of the border. We are sending our state agents, our security agents, to come to Hong Kong and open shop in Hong Kong. And this is actually explicitly forbidden by the basic law, Hong Kong's mini constitution.
And that was an agreement made when the British left Hong Kong, and it was supposed to be Hong Kong was to be autonomous for 50 years, starting in 1997. That apparently is not. China's not holding up its end of the deal. Now, I just read a story in Politico. The British government is saying anyone with those B&O passports, British national passports, they can apply for British citizenship if China continues down this road with Hong Kong. Is that a good idea? Is that a lifeline to the Hong Kongers?
It is going to be basically a major piece of news for a lot of people in Hong Kong, because there's a big difference between how the Portugal government treated Macau, which was also returned to China in 1999. In Macau, everyone was offered a chance. Everyone who had been born before a certain date was offered a Portuguese passport. And so those people who value freedoms all left. And today, Beijing has actually taken over Hong Kong and has taken over Macau. And Beijing is trying to rein in Hong Kong the way that it has already reined in Macau. And the British government never agreed to give Hong Kong citizens born before 1997 this exit option. And so you have the majority of Hong Kong population who demand freedom, who wants to preserve, who wants to defend what they have grown up with. And so why the national security bill is going to be so bad is that it's not just a minority of people who don't like Beijing, so that you can just make midnight knocks on the door and arrest these people and no one would care. But the majority of the population. So the act would turn Hong Kong into not just another Chinese city like Shenzhen or Shanghai, but it could turn Hong Kong into Xinjiang.
Wow. The Trump administration has not specified what measures it could take against China for this aggression in Hong Kong. However, during a press conference on Tuesday, President Trump was asked about sanctions against China. Here's what he said.
We're doing it now. We're doing something now. I think you'll find it very interesting. I'll be talking about it over the next couple of days. It's something you're going to be hearing about before the end of the week, very powerfully, I think.
Now, in a recent interview, Professor, you pointed out the international community, including the U.S., has often spoken out against China and the steady buildup of power over Hong Kong, but they haven't exacted any real punishments. You say Beijing is daring foreign governments to continue to issue words but take no actions. What measures or sanctions would you think might be effective at this point?
You are quite right. So I would say that even just a few weeks ago, I think the words, and probably Beijing were hearing the words too, that, oh, the State's Department is unlikely to do anything major because the US needs Hong Kong as much as Beijing needs Hong Kong. And so if you decertify Hong Kong's autonomous status, of course, this would hurt Hong Kong people rather than helping them. This would also hurt US business interests and not just Chinese interests. And so imposing targeted sanctions on these officials and police officers who have abused the human rights of Hong Kong people would be an important step. But still, this may not be enough because, a lot of these people don't care about traveling to the US. They may not really care about getting visa to study at US universities. And if these sanctions are going to be effective, they have to be coordinated with actually US allies.
What do you make of the suggestion, and I've read some reports of this, I'm also hearing it from people in the diplomatic community, that the Trump administration is considering rescinding the visas of Chinese students studying in the United States, expelling them from our institutions of higher learning. Is that a good option?
So, what I read today is that this is going to be targeted at graduate students who have connections with military establishments in China. So it seems to be a very targeted move. This may make sense because if Chinese students, they come to the US to get the undergrad education, they will be exposed to liberal arts education. They will be exposed to, writing these essays, addressing counter arguments and thinking broadly and critically. But when they come here just to go to grad school, that's very different. Especially, I think that people become very worried about all these STEM disciplines. Maybe they will get, actually, because grad students are very integrated into the research community, and so they may actually learn more. So people are hoping that beyond targeted sanctions, beyond imposing visa restrictions, that there may actually be more actions, maybe stronger actions about Hong Kong's separate custom status. What Beijing has done is that it's been trying to stifle Hong Kong's freedoms, yet preserving a special customs status granted by the US and all the different international Western countries. And so that may be a much stronger trump card.
Do you think the Chinese are using this global COVID crisis that is partially they're doing, as well as the U.S.-China trade agreement, to cover for these aggressive acts, not only in Hong Kong, but we see the military buildup and the aggression toward Taiwan. And there seems to be a military buildup as well.
You are quite right. So Beijing has been taking very aggressive action, not just against Hong Kong, but also intruding into the median line, separating the Chinese territory, mainland territory, and Taiwanese territory in the East China Sea. Also sending out troops to also breach the border with India, and also taking more actions in the South China Sea. Yeah, so across the board, definitely thinking that, well, the rest of the world, they may not like it, just like we built up all these islands and reefs in the South China Sea. They condemn us, but what actions have they actually taken? And so, and also that all these Western economies, they're probably so hard hit by the coronavirus, whereas the Chinese economy has recovered much faster because they can take very draconian measures, and so they have put the virus under control. Probably just thinking that, you guys may have continued to condemn us, but if you don't take any actions, we don't care. And so it is actually very good, a good sign that there's a declaration, there's a decertification, and some actions have to follow.
Well, they're provocative acts. You mentioned it. There have been clashes between Indian troops and Chinese troops in the Himalayas. We see aggression toward Vietnam, Taiwan. It seems they want to spread the hegemon throughout Asia. And is it time for the United States to align closely with India and perhaps help India and make India our partner in checking China?
It is correct in a way that the administration has been trying to build the Indo-Pacific kind of quasi-alliance. So it is a very good sign. But it's just as important as you also mentioned Vietnam. Vietnam wanted to get into the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Trade Pact, so badly. But the current administration, as soon as they came into office, they could pull out of it. A lot of these Asian economies, they are so beholden to the Chinese economy, and this is why Beijing can coerce them, can threaten them, and yet they don't dare do anything. So it is on the one hand, the administration should take very strong actions against Chinese actions. But you also don't want the US to take actions unilaterally. And so then essentially driving these other countries to become even more dependent on the Chinese economy. So the TPP probably should be restored along with restoring or strengthening the U.S. security alliances. For example, also not telling Korea that you guys have to take care of your own security bills and military bills that we're not paying.
Yeah, no, it leaves all sorts of openings for China, and they have the money to burn, and they don't care about human rights, so they will use their people as slave labor, and they can always beat a competition in trade and in the building of goods. I mean, this is the challenge with China. Finally, before I let you go, I only have a minute. What do you make of the religious hostility that the Chinese government has shown toward people of faith in the mainland? I mean, the Pope commended the faithful of China to the Blessed Mother this week. He tried to engage them with this still private deal signed between the Vatican and the Chinese government. Did that deal buy the Vatican any real leverage, in your opinion?
I do not think so. The most important thing to understand is that for the CCP, they are above God. And if people pledge their allegiance to something other than the party, outside of the party, that is why Beijing doesn't really like it. This is why they're tearing down crosses on the top of churches, even state-sanctioned churches. And so the deal the Vatican has struck with Beijing is really a bad mistake.
Wow. Well, we will leave it there. Professor Hui, thank you so much for your time. We will check in the days ahead. Professor Hui's latest columns on China and Hong Kong are available at victoriatbhui.wordpress.com. Professor, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.